They chained her to the pole for loving a human. Her crime was compassion, her sentence was public humiliation, but one man in the crowd saw more than a spectacle. He saw an opportunity. Dex Karan stepped forward with a challenge that silenced the entire colony. Trial by combat. One chance to free her. What happens next will redefine justice in Rust Harbor. Lyra Vex kept to the lower decks where shadows hid the blue tint of her skin. She worked in a lab no larger than a storage locker, surrounded by cultures and tissue samples. Her focus was cross-species cellular integration, how human and Cytheran biology could repair one another. She wasn't just studying theory. Her research showed real promise. Hybrid tissue samples healed faster, resisted radiation damage, even showed improved neural connectivity. It was the kind of work that could save lives on a dozen frontier worlds. But in Rust Harbor, it was forbidden. The genetic purity mandate made any interspecies contact treason, especially romantic involvement. When she met a human engineer in the maintenance corridors, it started with shared data pads and hushed conversations about regenerative medicine. It became something more. They were careful. They met in the silent hours in sections where the cameras were old and the patrols sparse. Colony security found them anyway. They'd been reported by a maintenance tech who noticed the same access codes used at odd hours. The warden himself came down to the lower decks. He didn't ask about her research. He called it contamination, a threat to human genetic destiny. Her public sentencing was held in the central atrium. The crowd pressed against the railings, their faces hard in the artificial light. Guards forced her onto the platform. The warden's voice echoed off metal walls as he listed her crimes. Loving a human, sharing knowledge, believing different species could build something stronger together. When the first guard struck her, the sound was flat and final. The crowd roared approval. She didn't cry out. Her mind held onto the images from her microscope, the way human and Cytheran cells merged, creating something resilient, something new. She thought of the engineer, already taken to a re-education camp. She wondered if he was thinking of her too. The pole they chained her to was cold against her back. She could feel the vibration of the colony's machinery through the metal. Her arms ached. Her pride hurt more. They'd made an example of her, a warning to anyone who might cross the line. But as she looked out at the angry faces, she held on to one truth. Her work wasn't contamination. It was a cure. And cures don't stay hidden forever. The genetic purity mandate ran deeper than law. It was the operating system of hegemony control, written into colony infrastructure and civilian consciousness. Every citizen carried identification chips that monitored bloodline credentials. Biometric scanners at corridor junctions logged movement patterns, flagging unusual interspecies contact. Public punishments occurred weekly in the central atrium. The regime called them cleansing ceremonies. They served as live demonstrations of what happened to those who broke the purity codes. Attendance wasn't mandatory, but absence got noted. Security reviewed camera feeds of the crowds, marking those who looked away or showed discomfort. The warden framed each case as biological contamination. He used medical terminology to describe moral crimes. Lyra's case file listed genetic trespass and species integrity violation. He spoke of her research as if it were a pathogen threatening the colony's immune system. His rhetoric turned scientific curiosity into a public health crisis. Crowds gathered for multiple reasons. Some came for the spectacle. Others attended out of fear. Missing a cleansing might mark them as sympathizers. Parents brought children to teach them the consequences of disobedience. The atmosphere was tense, performative. People cheered when expected to cheer. They fell silent on cue. Bloodline tracking extended beyond identification chips. The regime maintained genealogical databases going back 3 generations. Marriage applications underwent genetic compatibility reviews. Employment opportunities depended on purity ratings. The system created a caste structure based on perceived genetic worth. Mixed species relationships represented the ultimate breach. They threatened the ideological foundation of hegemony control. If species could coexist peacefully, even beneficially, the regime's entire justification collapsed. That's why the punishments were so public, so brutal. The message needed to be unforgettable. Those who questioned the system disappeared quietly. They didn't get public trials. Security teams came at night, extracting dissenters from their quarters. Neighbors learned not to ask questions. The taken were listed as transferred to re-education facilities, though few returned unchanged. Surveillance was constant but subtle. Audio sensors and ventilation shafts monitored conversations. Pattern analysis software flagged unusual meeting frequencies between species. The system created a culture of self-regulation, where people reported suspicions to avoid becoming suspects themselves. The fear worked like an atmospheric pressure. It wasn't something people discussed, but everyone breathed it. They made choices based on it: who to talk to, where to look, what questions not to ask. The regime had engineered compliance into the colony's social architecture. Control maintained itself through layered reinforcement. Public punishment created visible consequences. Surveillance created constant awareness. Bloodline tracking created structural inequality. Together they formed a system that felt inevitable, unchangeable. Resistance seemed not just dangerous, but pointless. The apparatus was designed to make fear more effective than walls or weapons. It turned citizens into enforcers, neighborhoods into monitoring stations, families into compliance units. The real prison wasn't made of metal barriers. It was made of conditioned responses and calculated silences. Dex Karan stood among the miners and mechanics in the atrium crowd, his maintenance coveralls blending with the other laborers. His posture set him apart, though. Shoulders square, weight balanced evenly, eyes moving in systematic scans. He wasn't watching the spectacle. He was assessing it. His enhanced perception recorded details others missed. The positions of 12 security personnel, their weapon types, the sight lines between them, the structural weaknesses in the punishment platform, a loose bolt on the left support, stress fractures near the base. The composition of the crowd: 60% human, 30% mixed species laborers, 10% regime loyalists. He noted who cheered loudest, who looked away, who recorded the event on their comms. 3 years embedded in Rust Harbor's infrastructure had given him intimate knowledge of its systems. He knew which cameras had blind spots, which ventilation shafts connected to secure areas, which maintenance hatches could be opened with a precise kick. He'd repaired power conduits in the warden's office, replaced filters in the security barracks, patched leaks in the detention block. Every repair job taught him something about the colony's vulnerabilities. When the warden declared Lyra's research contamination, Dex's assessment shifted. He recognized her value immediately, not just for her scientific knowledge, but for what she represented. Her work proved the regime's foundational ideology was false. That made her more dangerous to them than any armed rebel. She was living evidence that genetic purity wasn't strength, it was limitation. The crowd's bloodthirsty enthusiasm washed around him like noise. He remained still, processing variables: the warden's rhetoric, the security deployment pattern, the structural integrity of the platform. His calm intensity formed a pocket of silence in the roaring atrium. People near him unconsciously gave him space without knowing why. The decision to intervene came when the warden mentioned disposing of her research. Dex's mission parameters included acquiring exactly that kind of scientific data. But more than that, he recognized the strategic opportunity. Saving her would strike at the regime's credibility. It would show their control wasn't absolute. He'd spent 3 years building cover, observing patterns, waiting for the right moment. This was it, not some grand assault on the regime's strongholds, but a precise intervention at their most public moment of enforcement. The symbolism would resonate through the colony's rumor networks. The story would spread faster than any propaganda. His movement through the crowd was deliberate but not rushed. People parted before him without understanding why they were moving. He kept his hands visible, his expression neutral. The security teams hadn't noticed him yet. They were focused on the spectacle, on maintaining crowd control from the perimeter. He calculated the risk factors: probability of the warden accepting the challenge based on his psychological profile, probability of winning against whatever champion they fielded, probability of escape routes remaining viable after the confrontation. The numbers aligned within acceptable parameters. When he stepped from the crowd, it wasn't with dramatic flair. It was with the economical movement of someone crossing a room to perform a familiar task. The challenge he spoke carried no emotion, only clear enunciation. He wasn't making a heroic gesture. He was executing a calculated tactical decision. The silence that followed felt heavier than the crowd's noise. Every eye focused on this maintenance worker who'd just challenged the entire power structure. Dex stood waiting, his body relaxed but ready. He'd just turned their public punishment into a different kind of spectacle entirely. Dex's voice cut through the crowd noise without raising volume. It carried like a blade sliding from its sheath. He spoke the ancient formula for trial by combat, each word precise, inflectionless. The phrase hung in the air, a relic from Earth's legal history that the regime had never formally abolished. Their own propaganda celebrated such traditions as evidence of human cultural purity. The warden's reaction was immediate, but contained. His jaw tightened. His eyes scanned Dex, assessing threat level, political ramifications. Denying the challenge would reveal the regime's hypocrisy. They claimed to honor tradition while ignoring it when inconvenient. Accepting meant risking their spectacle turning against them. The calculation showed in his hesitation, the slight delay before response. Crowd dynamics shifted palpably. Where moments before they'd been unified in condemnation, now curiosity fractured their attention. People leaned forward, whispered to neighbors. The certainty of punishment had been replaced by uncertainty of outcome. Spectators became witnesses to a contest rather than participants in an execution. Dex's proposal reframed everything. Lyra was no longer just a condemned criminal. She became the prize in a ritual combat. Her fate shifted from predetermined to contested. The warden understood the danger immediately. This wasn't just about one alien scientist. It was about the narrative of absolute control. Security teams received silent alerts through their implants. Fingers moved toward weapon triggers. The warden's second-in-command spoke into his wristcom, activating emergency protocols. Reinforcements began moving toward the atrium from barracks levels. Overhead lights flickered slightly as power diverted to security systems. The warden's decision came through clenched teeth. He accepted the challenge while maintaining authoritarian posture. His voice boomed with forced confidence, proclaiming the regime's strength would prevail. He announced their champion would defend the colony's honor. The crowd's murmur grew louder, a mix of excitement and unease. Dex remained motionless during the announcements. He watched the warden's body language, the security team movements, the crowd's shifting allegiances. He'd turned their ceremony into a high-stakes gamble. The regime now had to win publicly or suffer credibility loss. Emergency protocols escalated throughout the colony. Patrols increased at all key intersections. Surveillance systems focused entirely on the atrium. Command staff monitored from secure locations, analyzing the unknown challenger. They ran facial recognition, biosignature scans, movement pattern analysis. Nothing matched their databases. The arena space cleared as guards directed spectators back from the central platform. They formed a rough circle around the punishment pole where Lyra remained chained. The metallic floor rang with footsteps as security teams took positions. The atmosphere changed from judicial to combative. Dex stood at the center of the newly formed arena. He removed his maintenance coveralls to reveal simple combat gear beneath. His movements were economical, devoid of theatricality. He stretched his neck slightly, rotated his shoulders. The preparation was functional, not performative. The warden watched from the elevated judgment platform. His expression showed controlled anger. He'd been forced into a scenario he didn't control. His regime's authority now depended on a fight outcome rather than bureaucratic certainty. The symbolism wasn't lost on the crowd or his security teams. From the corridors beyond the atrium, the sound of heavy footsteps approached. The regime's champion was coming. The crowd parted as Crusher Malik entered the space, his modified frame towering over everyone. Dex watched his approach without reaction. The chessboard was set. One move could checkmate an empire. Crusher Malik entered the arena like machinery coming online. His modified frame stood half again taller than an unaugmented human. The hydraulic systems in his legs produced a distinct hiss with each step. Reinforced skeletal structure gave his movements a deliberate, powerful quality. He was the regime's ideal of genetic superiority made physical. His combat modifications represented their top-tier military investment. Hydraulic muscle enhancements could triple his striking power for short bursts. Reinforced bone plating protected vital areas without sacrificing mobility. Neural implants processed visual and auditory input at accelerated rates, giving him reaction times 30% faster than organic opponents. The system created a fighter who could outthink and overpower any normal adversary. His signature weapon system involved retractable wrist blades. They extended in under half a second with enough force to penetrate light armor plating. The blades emerged from concealed forearm housings with a sharp metallic click. Their edge remained molecularly sharp, capable of slicing through most materials found in colony construction. He could retract them just as quickly, making the weapon system both lethal and concealable. Malik's fighting style emphasized overwhelming force. He didn't waste movement on technical precision or defensive postures. His strategy involved closing distance quickly, delivering crippling strikes and leveraging his weight advantage. He trained against multiple opponents simultaneously, often leaving them with broken bones and concussion injuries. The regime's combat instructors considered him their most effective close-quarters fighter. His undefeated record served as constant propaganda. The regime circulated footage of his victories through colony networks. Commentary emphasized how his genetically pure human baseline, enhanced by their technology, proved superior to mixed-species combatants. They never mentioned the extensive modifications that made him effectively post-human. The narrative focused solely on genetic purity as the source of his dominance. The resources invested in his creation were substantial. His augmentation surgery required specialized facilities only available on core worlds. Maintenance of his systems demanded a team of technicians and regular shipments of proprietary components. The regime considered him worth the expense, a living demonstration of their technological and biological supremacy. He was more symbol than soldier. His presence in the arena communicated multiple messages. To the crowd, he represented invincible authority. To potential dissenters, he served as warning. To the regime leadership, he confirmed their ideological certainty. Every fight reinforced the mythology of genetic purity as the path to power. His victories were never just victories, they were validations. Malik's training eliminated hesitation or mercy from his responses. He reacted to threats with immediate maximum force. His neural implants filtered out emotional interference during combat. He assessed opponents as tactical problems rather than living beings. The regime's psychologist had engineered this detachment into his operating parameters. It made him perfectly compliant and brutally efficient. He entered the combat space without looking at decks. His attention focused on the warden's platform, awaiting official initiation of the bout. His posture showed no tension or preparation. He stood ready like a weapon awaiting activation. The crowd's murmurs didn't register in his enhanced hearing. He filtered everything except combat-relevant audio. The warden gave the signal to begin. Malik's systems shifted from standby to active engagement. Hydraulics pressurized. Neural implants optimized sensory processing. Wrist blades remained retracted but ready. He turned toward Dex with the deliberate motion of heavy machinery aligning. He wasn't entering a fight. He was fulfilling his programmed function. Dex moved with the economical grace of a blade-cutting air. He didn't match Malik's power. He circumvented it. Each step conserved energy. Each deflection redirected force rather than absorbing it. His eyes tracked the micro-delays in Malik's hydraulic systems, the slight hesitation between neural command and physical response. He was mapping the machine within the man. Malik's enhancements created predictable patterns. The hydraulic systems required milliseconds to pressurize before delivering maximum force. His reinforced skeleton had specific load-bearing points. The neural implants processed threats in priority sequences. Dex recognized these patterns from military training modules. He'd studied augmented combatants before. He knew their weaknesses weren't in their armor but in their connections. Each dodge served dual purposes. When Malik swung a fist weighing 40 kilograms, Dex didn't just evade. He positioned himself where the follow-through would leave Malik off balance. He placed his feet where hydraulic lines ran close to the surface. He kept moving toward Malik's left side, where diagnostic ports created subtle structural vulnerabilities. Every movement was both defense and preparation. Dex targeted joint connections instead of armored plates. He struck at elbow actuators, knee servos, spinal interface points. His blows used precise impact angles rather than raw power. A strike to Malik's hip joint didn't try to break the reinforced bone. It misaligned the hydraulic piston controlling leg movement. The damage was cumulative, systemic. He used Malik's momentum against him. When Malik charged, Dex shifted slightly and redirected the energy. The larger man's force became his own enemy. A missed strike became an opportunity to unbalance him. Dex's hands moved like a mechanic adjusting machinery. Precise adjustments with disproportionate effects. He wasn't fighting strength. He was disrupting function. The crowd's cheers diminished to murmurs. They'd expected a brutal spectacle. They witnessed something closer to surgery. Malik's powerful attacks hit empty air or glanced off deflecting arms. Dex's responses looked minimal but produced visible effects. Malik's left arm began moving slower. His right leg developed a slight hitch. The champion was losing efficiency with each passing second. Dex's breathing remained steady. His heart rate stayed controlled. He conserved energy while Malik expended it. The hydraulic enhancements required massive power consumption. Malik's systems were designed for quick victories, not extended engagements. Dex extended the fight deliberately. He was draining the battery while preserving his own resources. His strikes focused on power transfer points. A sharp impact to Malik's shoulder disrupted the fluid transfer to his arm hydraulics. A precise kick to the back of his knee affected the piston-controlling leg extension. Dex avoided the heavily plated chest and skull. He targeted the places where enhancement met biology, where machinery connected to flesh. The rhythm of combat changed. Malik's movements grew less coordinated. His attacks lost their overwhelming force. Dex began controlling the engagement completely. He dictated the distance, the angle, the pace. What began as a confrontation became a demonstration. The regime's perfect weapon was being dismantled piece by piece. Technical mastery overcame brute force through understanding systems. Dex didn't see an invincible champion. He saw an assembly of components with failure points. His combat became a clinical dissection of the regime's over-engineered ideology. Every precise strike proved that complexity created vulnerability. Perfection wasn't strength. Adaptability was. Malik activated his wrist blades with a sharp hydraulic hiss. The sound cut through the arena's tension. Twin blades extended from his forearm housings, gleaming under the harsh lights. Their edges showed molecular sharpness capable of slicing through reinforced plating. This was the regime's ultimate concession. Their champion needed weapons to win. Dex didn't retreat from the blades. He moved closer. He knew blade weapons had ineffective ranges. Inside a certain distance, they became liabilities rather than advantages. He entered that space deliberately, forcing Malik to adjust his striking angles. The blades required full extension for maximum effect. At close quarters, they lost killing force. Malik swung the blades in practiced patterns. Dex used forearm blocks to redirect rather than stop the strikes. He deflected the blades along their flat sides, minimizing edge contact. His blocks used precise angles to guide the weapons past his body. Each deflection created opening fractions of a second. He waited for the pattern to repeat. The third blade strike came in a horizontal arc. Dex blocked upward, redirecting the force. He stepped inside the swing, his left hand securing Malik's wrist. His right hand gripped the elbow joint. He applied pressure at exact points, exploiting the mechanical connections. The joint lock wasn't about strength. It was about leverage against hydraulic systems. The blade assembly tore free with a sound of breaking connections. Hydraulic fluid sprayed from severed lines. Electrical components sparked. Dex held the disconnected prosthesis, its blade still extended. He examined it for a moment, turning it in his hands. His assessment was clinical, professional. He noted the manufacturing marks, the power cell type, the actuation mechanism. The crowd fell completely silent. They'd witnessed something impossible. The regime's technology had been turned against itself. Their champion stood with one arm ending in sparking wires and leaking fluid. The dismantled weapon lay in Dex's hands, its blade still sharp but powerless. The symbolism was unmistakable. Dex's appraisal revealed deep military knowledge. He identified the blade system as Hegemony Combat Prosthesis Model 7. He recognized the manufacturer's stamp on the housing. His fingers traced the power transfer conduits without touching the sharp edges. He spoke the technical specifications under his breath. The terminology was precise, drawn from military procurement databases. The warden's face showed dawning recognition. He'd heard those technical terms before. They matched classified briefings about prototype soldiers. The maintenance worker's knowledge exceeded anything a civilian should possess. His fighting style aligned with restricted combat training modules. The situation had escalated beyond a simple arena challenge. Malik stood swaying slightly, systems destabilized by the disconnection. His neural implants struggled to compensate for the sudden hardware loss. Error messages flashed across his visual display. His remaining systems prioritized stability over combat effectiveness. The regime's perfect weapon was now damaged, incomplete. The dismantled blade assembly lay sparking on the arena floor. Its gleaming surface reflected the stunned faces in the crowd. The symbol of the regime's technological superiority had been ripped away. What remained was a broken champion and a maintenance worker who understood military systems too well. The balance of power in the atrium had shifted completely. Dex's movements shifted from efficient to flawless. The transition was subtle but absolute. Where before he'd moved like a highly trained soldier, now he moved like something beyond human parameters. His dodges became mathematically perfect. His strikes landed with impossible precision. His breathing remained steady while his heart rate stayed unnaturally low. The maintenance worker facade dropped away completely. His appraisal of the blade prosthesis used precise military terminology. He identified the manufacturer by their stamping pattern. He noted the power cell type as standard issue for third-generation hegemony combat systems. His fingers traced the hydraulic conduits without looking, as if he'd memorized the schematics. The assessment sounded like a technical inspection report. The warden's face showed recognition dawning. He'd seen classified briefings about prototype soldiers who'd gone missing 3 years earlier. The files described enhanced perception, perfect combat recall, and the ability to process tactical data at accelerated rates. The maintenance worker's capabilities matched those reports exactly. His fighting style aligned with restricted training modules. Dex's enhanced perception became visible in his actions. He processed Malik's remaining systems faster than the neural implants could compensate. He anticipated adjustments before they occurred. His movements seemed almost prescient, responding to threats before they fully manifested. The speed of his analysis exceeded anything in the regime's combat databases. 3 years of hiding in plain sight ended with that clinical verdict on the prosthesis. Dex had maintained cover as a maintenance worker, repairing systems, following schedules, blending with the workforce. His enhanced abilities had remained concealed beneath mundane labor. The blade assessment revealed knowledge no civilian should possess. Emergency protocols escalated immediately. Security teams received new threat classifications. The warden's voice crackled through comm systems ordering full lockdown. Reinforcements converged on the atrium from multiple directions. Weapons systems activated throughout the colony. The situation had transformed from public punishment to military engagement. Lyra watched from the pole where she remained chained. She saw the change in her rescuer's bearing. The economy of movement became something more, a kind of perfect efficiency that seemed almost machine-like. She recognized the technical terms he used. They matched advanced military research she'd seen in restricted databases. Her rescuer wasn't just skilled. He was engineered. The designation came through the warden's emergency channel. Security Command identified the threat as Titan-class prototype. Specific designation, Titan 7. The number matched missing personnel files from a black site development program. The prototypes were supposed to be decommissioned after failed loyalty tests. One had evidently survived. Titan 7 represented the regime's own technology turned against them. The enhancement systems were their design. The combat training was their programming. The strategic analysis capability was their investment. They'd created a perfect soldier who'd rejected their ideology. Now he stood in their arena, having dismantled their champion. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't a random maintenance worker challenging authority. This was a calculated move by a strategic asset. Titan 7 had chosen this moment, this location, this method for maximum impact. The public nature of the confrontation was intentional. The message would spread through the colony within hours. Dex stood over the sparking prosthesis, his attention already shifting to the surrounding security teams. His enhanced perception assessed threat vectors, escape routes, tactical options. The maintenance coveralls seemed incongruous now. His true nature was visible in his posture, his focus, his complete lack of hesitation. The disguise had served its purpose. Titan 7 had just declared war on the regime that created him. The declaration wasn't through words or transmissions. It was through action. The dismantling of their champion, the public challenge, the revelation of his identity. These were opening moves in a conflict long planned. The revolution had found its spear point. Dex moved with the colony's infrastructure responding to his command. He retrieved a fallen guard's rifle without breaking stride, his fingers finding the safety and power cell status by touch. Emergency lights flickered overhead as security systems diverted power to containment protocols. He guided Lyra toward a maintenance hatch that should have been locked. His palm touched the access panel in a specific sequence. The hatch slid open. His knowledge of the colony's layout went beyond familiarity. He knew which corridors had camera blind spots dating from last month's repair work. He remembered which ventilation shafts connected to secure areas because he'd cleaned their filters. Service tunnels became personal pathways, their dimensions and obstacles mapped in his memory from 3 years of maintenance work. He moved through them like a body moving through its own circulatory system. Security teams found unexpected resistance from their own systems. Doors locked automatically ahead of the fugitive's passage, then unlocked after they'd moved through. Camera feeds along their route developed temporary static interference. Environmental controls created fog in certain corridors, reducing visibility for pursuers. The colony's infrastructure seemed to cooperate with their escape rather than hinder it. Lyra recognized the precision in every movement. Dex's turns were never hesitant. His choices of direction showed no uncertainty. When he paused, it was exactly long enough to assess the next segment of their route. His breathing remained steady while hers came in ragged gasps. She realized this wasn't improvisation. This was the execution of a plan rehearsed through countless mental simulations. The industrial maze offered protection through complexity. Dex led them through machinery spaces where massive generators hummed, their noise covering movement sounds. They passed through coolant recycling stations where dripping water and chemical smells created sensory confusion. In the fabrication bays, half-built ship components provided cover and obscured sightlines. The pursuing security teams had to slow down to check each possible hiding place. Dex's enhanced perception processed multiple data streams simultaneously. He monitored the vibration patterns through deck plates to estimate pursuit distance. He analyzed air current changes to detect approaching patrols. His hearing filtered background noise for specific boot tread patterns and comms chatter. The information guided his route choices in real time, avoiding concentrations of security forces. They reached a service elevator that normally required authorization codes. Dex bypassed the security with a maintenance override he'd programmed months earlier. The elevator descended toward the lower decks, moving through sections most residents never saw. Lyra watched the level indicators counting down toward the colony's foundation layers. The atmosphere grew heavier, filled with the scent of lubricants and ozone. The escape route demonstrated strategic preparation. Every obstacle they encountered had been anticipated. Every security measure had a countermeasure ready. Dex's 3 years as a maintenance worker hadn't been about hiding. They'd been about learning, preparing, and quietly weaponizing the colony's own systems against itself. The infrastructure that was supposed to control residents became their means of liberation. They moved through service corridors barely wider than their shoulders. Conduits carrying power and data lines lined the walls. Dex touched certain junctions as they passed, small adjustments that would delay pursuit. He rerouted power from surveillance systems ahead of them. He triggered fire containment protocols behind them. The colony's security apparatus was responding to his commands as much as to the warden's. The final barrier was a heavy blast door marking the boundary to unregistered spaces. Dex placed his hands against a maintenance panel, entering a code sequence that wasn't in any official manual. The door slid open to reveal darkness beyond. He guided Lyra through into the unknown sections of the colony, places that didn't appear on official maps. The door closed behind them, cutting off the pursuit completely. They stood in absolute darkness for a moment before emergency lighting activated. The space was vast, filled with mining equipment that had been outdated decades earlier. Dex moved toward a particular hauler unit that looked like all the others. His movements were sure in the dim light. He had reached a place where the regime's control didn't extend. The laboratory space was spare and functional, lit by the pale glow of monitor screens and specimen illuminators. Lyra arranged her equipment with methodical care, her blue hands moving with familiar precision across culture trays and genetic sequencers. The air carried the clean scent of sterilization fields and the subtle ozone tang of active instrumentation. She was reconstructing her research from memory and fragmented data backups piece by piece. Her work focused on cellular integration. She cultivated hybrid tissue samples combining human and Cytheran biology. The cells showed remarkable compatibility under the microscopes. Healing rates accelerated when the two genetic lines interacted. Radiation damage repaired itself more completely in mixed cultures. Neural tissues demonstrated enhanced connectivity patterns. Each finding contradicted the regime's doctrine of genetic purity as strength. Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked at an adjacent station, her movements sharp with focused energy. She had fled the core worlds when her cross-species immunity research was declared heretical. Now she documented cellular responses in real time, her notes precise and thorough. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words carried weight. "They fear what they cannot control," she told Lyra one evening. Diversity represents variables. Their system requires predictability. The research challenged hegemony ideology at its foundation. If mixed biology created stronger, more adaptable life forms, then genetic purity became a limitation rather than an advantage. The regime's entire justification for control collapsed under microscopic evidence. Their laws against interspecies contact weren't about protection. They were about maintaining power through biological segregation. Lyra's experiments expanded to include other species in sanctuary. She studied Vostran cellular structures, Andromedan neural patterns, even the unique biology of enhanced humans like Dex. Each combination revealed new possibilities. Hybrid tissues resisted disease better. They adapted to environmental stresses more effectively. The data accumulated steadily, forming an undeniable argument against genetic isolationism. The laboratory became the intellectual heart of sanctuary. Scientists from different species shared findings openly. Military strategists studied the implications for troop endurance and recovery. Medical teams applied the research to practical healing techniques. The work moved from theoretical to applied science quickly. Every breakthrough demonstrated the practical benefits of diversity. Parents brought children to see the laboratory displays. They showed them the cultures where different cells worked together. They explained how strength came from combination rather than purity. The next generation grew up seeing biological diversity as natural and beneficial. The regime's teachings about contamination seemed increasingly strange to them. Lyra's personal commitment deepened with each discovery. Her relationship with the human engineer hadn't been just emotional attraction. It had been biological curiosity made personal. She wondered if their compatibility extended to cellular levels neither had considered. The question lingered in her research, driving her to investigate deeper connections. The laboratory's security was tight but unobtrusive. Everyone understood the value of their work. The findings were shared through secure channels to sympathetic researchers across the sector. Each data packet contained not just scientific information but political challenge. The regime couldn't suppress knowledge forever, especially when that knowledge offered practical benefits. Medical applications became their most powerful tool. Healing techniques derived from hybrid research saved lives in sanctuary and beyond. The regime's restrictions suddenly seemed counterproductive when their own citizens suffered from cures they'd outlawed. Practical need began outweighing ideological purity in people's calculations. Lyra worked late one cycle, reviewing neural connectivity patterns. She noticed anomalies in her own bioreadings that didn't match typical Cytheran baselines. The patterns showed metabolic changes inconsistent with stress or fatigue. She ran additional tests expecting instrument error. The results came back consistent. The implications settled slowly, then all at once. Her research had just become personal in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sanctuary Base occupied the hollowed-out core of an asteroid drifting in unclaimed territory. Its location didn't appear on any official star charts. The entrance was concealed behind mineral deposits and sensor-scattering rock formations. Inside, the base felt both makeshift and permanent, a testament to necessity and careful planning. Nearly 200 refugees called it home. They were enhanced soldiers who'd rejected their programming, alien scientists fleeing persecution, mixed species families who'd hidden their existence. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, united by their refusal to accept the regime's genetic purity laws. The population grew slowly, carefully, each new arrival vetted and welcomed. Elena led them with quiet authority. She was a former hegemony logistics officer who'd turned her strategic mind against her former masters. Her leadership style emphasized practical solutions over ideology. She valued diversity as strategic strength, assigning tasks based on capability rather than species. Under her direction, the base functioned with disciplined efficiency. The base served as both refuge and incubator. Political discussions happened in the common areas, where different perspectives shaped new models of governance. Scientific research advanced in laboratories like Lyra's, exploring possibilities the regime had outlawed. Military training occurred in the lower chambers, where enhanced soldiers shared combat techniques with civilian volunteers. They monitored hegemony communications through repurposed mining equipment. Antenna arrays hidden in the asteroid's surface picked up transmission traffic. Analysts decoded messages, tracked ship movements, identified potential allies. The information flow was constant, a quiet hum beneath daily life. Everyone understood the importance of early warning systems. Lyra's laboratory became the heart of their medical efforts. Her cross-species research produced practical healing techniques that benefited everyone. The work demonstrated the value of biological diversity in tangible ways. Patients recovered faster. Injuries healed more completely. The evidence mounted quietly but persistently against the regime's dogma. Dex found others like himself in the base's population. 3 more Titan-class prototypes had escaped decommissioning. They shared tactical knowledge, compared enhancement systems, discussed their awakening to independent thought. Their presence provided security and technical expertise. They helped modify the base's systems, improving defenses and life support. The community developed its own culture. Children attended classes that taught multiple languages and perspectives. Meals incorporated different culinary traditions. Holidays from various species were observed and explained. The base became a working model of the society they hoped to build, one where difference was respected rather than feared. Security was maintained through constant vigilance. Patrols monitored the asteroid's surface for approaching ships. Internal sensors tracked environmental systems and potential breaches. Everyone had emergency assignments, from the youngest child to the oldest resident. They practiced evacuation drills regularly, treating safety as collective responsibility. The base's infrastructure expanded gradually. New chambers were carved from solid rock using mining lasers. Life support systems were upgraded to handle increased population. Gardens provided fresh food while testing agricultural techniques for different species. The place felt less like a hiding spot and more like a settlement with each passing cycle. Sanctuary represented living proof against genetic fascism. Its very existence contradicted the regime's central claim that diversity meant weakness. The community demonstrated that different species could not only coexist but create something stronger together. They weren't just surviving. They were building the future they believed in, one day at a time, deep within the silent rock. The research conducted at Sanctuary went beyond academic curiosity. It methodically dismantled the regime's core ideology piece by piece. Lyra's cellular studies proved hybrid tissue samples resisted radiation exposure more effectively than pure genetic lines. The cells repaired damage faster, maintained structural integrity under stress, and demonstrated resilience that contradicted years of propaganda. It wasn't just theoretical. The findings had immediate practical applications for colony survival in high radiation zones. Healing rates showed measurable improvement in mixed species samples. Wounds closed faster. Tissue regeneration accelerated. The biological processes worked with enhanced efficiency when different genetic materials interacted. This wasn't marginal improvement. It represented significant advancement in medical science. The implications for trauma care and long-term health management were substantial. Neural connectivity studies revealed even more profound evidence. Brain tissue from combined species showed enhanced pattern recognition capabilities. Problem-solving efficiency increased. Memory retention improved. The research suggested that cognitive diversity produced tangible intellectual advantages. The regime's claims of pure genetic superiority faced direct contradiction from microscope and scanner data. Dr. Tanaka's parallel research with Scytherin partners reinforced these findings. Her work demonstrated that biological diversity created strength through complementary systems. Different species brought different evolutionary advantages to the cellular level. Combining them produced hybrid vigor that exceeded the sum of its parts. The data formed a consistent pattern across multiple research lines. The practical benefits extended beyond theory. Medical teams at Sanctuary applied the research to actual patient care. Healing techniques derived from hybrid studies reduced recovery times. Surgical outcomes improved. Chronic conditions showed better management potential. The work wasn't just challenging ideology, it was saving lives and reducing suffering. These medical breakthroughs became Sanctuary's most effective weapon against the regime. It was difficult to argue with results that improved quality of life. Citizens suffering from treatable conditions began questioning why such advancements were forbidden. The regime's restrictions started appearing counterproductive rather than protective. The research offered solutions to real problems people faced daily: radiation sickness treatments, wound healing accelerants, neural regeneration techniques. Each application demonstrated that genetic diversity provided practical benefits. The regime's purity laws suddenly seemed like obstacles to progress rather than protections. Scientific evidence accumulated steadily, forming an undeniable body of proof. The research was shared carefully through secure channels to sympathetic scientists across the sector. Each data packet contained not just information, but political challenge. The regime's narrative faced growing contradiction from verifiable facts. Medical necessity began outweighing ideological compliance. When people saw loved ones suffering from cures that existed but were forbidden, their loyalty wavered. The regime's control depended on belief in their ideological superiority. Science was providing alternative evidence. The laboratory work became a quiet revolution. Each discovery, each application, each healed patient represented a crack in the regime's foundation. They weren't fighting with weapons or speeches. They were fighting with data and results. The most powerful lies fall not to opposition but to alternatives that work better. The pregnancy began as a quiet physiological fact, then became something much larger. Lyra noticed the changes in her own cellular readings before any other symptoms appeared. Her metabolic pattern shifted in ways that shouldn't exist in pure Scytheran biology. The hybrid cells showed activity she recognized from her research, but had never expected to experience personally. Scientific curiosity became bodily reality. The early development markers aligned with her laboratory findings. Cellular division rates exceeded normal parameters. Radiation resistance manifested at the molecular level. Healing factors activated more quickly than in single-species embryos. Each test result reinforced what her research had suggested. Hybrid biology wasn't just possible. It offered advantages pure genetic lines couldn't match. The regime's classification of such offspring as contaminants reflected their ideological position, not biological reality. Official documents referred to mixed-species children as genetic aberrations requiring isolation and study. The language treated them like hazardous materials rather than living beings. This framing justified extreme measures against families who chose to cross species boundaries. Sanctuary residents viewed the pregnancy differently. They saw Kai as validation of their entire movement. His existence proved that different species could create new life together. He represented the future they were fighting for, a galaxy where biology wasn't destiny. His development became a subject of quiet celebration and profound significance. Dex experienced the news with characteristic analytical detachment initially. He processed the information through tactical and strategic lenses. The pregnancy increased Lyra's vulnerability, and therefore required additional security measures. It changed their operational priorities and timeline considerations. Then the human aspect surfaced despite his training. He found himself considering possibilities his programming had never addressed. Lyra's research took on new dimensions of personal investment. She monitored her own biological changes with professional interest and personal wonder. The data she collected wasn't just scientific observation anymore. It was the story of her child's formation. Each discovery about hybrid cellular function felt like learning something about who Kai would become. The pregnancy progressed with fewer complications than single-species pregnancies typically showed. Lyra's energy levels remained stable. Morning sickness was minimal. Fetal development markers consistently exceeded expectations. The hybrid biology seemed to create a more efficient gestational process. These observations found their way into her research notes alongside personal reflections. Security around Lyra tightened considerably. Dex coordinated with other enhanced soldiers to ensure constant protection. The regime would consider Kai the ultimate prize, living proof that their ideology could be physically challenged. His capture would represent both symbolic victory and research opportunity for their scientists. Sanctuary's defenses adjusted to account for this new vulnerability. The community's response was protective, but respectful. People offered help without intrusion. Medical staff provided care while documenting the unusual aspects of the pregnancy for research purposes. Everyone understood they were witnessing something significant. Kai's development became a collective project that reinforced their shared purpose. Lyra sometimes placed her hand on her abdomen while working in the laboratory. She'd feel the movement beneath her palm and consider the irony. The regime had condemned her research as contamination. Now that same research was creating life inside her. The child would be living proof that their fears were unfounded. His very cells would demonstrate that diversity created strength. Dex began spending off-duty hours studying child development materials. His enhanced perception absorbed information about prenatal care, early childhood education, emotional development. The material wasn't in any military training manual. He was building a new knowledge base for a role he'd never expected to play. The preparation felt both unfamiliar and necessary. Kai's conception represented a turning point in their struggle. He wasn't just a child, he was evidence that could change minds across the galaxy. His existence challenged the regime's foundational claims at the biological level. The pregnancy became their most powerful argument, a quiet, growing rebuttal to years of dogma. The fleet's targeting computers developed subtle errors. A miscalibrated azimuth here, a misaligned rangefinder there. Imperfections compounded during combat maneuvers. 3 interceptor ships fired on coordinates that showed hostile signatures on their displays. The signatures didn't exist in reality. The ships unleashed firepower against empty space. Lyra's knowledge of hegemony ship design proved crucial. She identified the cascade failure points in their network architecture. A minor adjustment to the flagship's navigation database created waypoint errors across the formation. Another tweak to the fire control system introduced targeting lag during high-speed maneuvers. The changes were small enough to avoid immediate detection, but significant enough to compromise combat effectiveness. The strike team moved through the flagship's corridors with precise timing. Dex disabled internal security systems using military override codes the regime thought were secure. Elena created distractions at critical junctions, drawing security teams away from the command center. Kip intercepted communications, feeding false status reports to the bridge crew. Dr. Patel worked from Sanctuary, inserting corrupted data packets into the fleet's network. Their goal wasn't destruction, but disruption. Dex bypassed armed guards rather than engaging them. He used non-lethal techniques to incapacitate personnel when necessary. The team focused on reaching the primary computer core, the brain of the fleet's command system. Every action served that objective without unnecessary violence. The 4-minute operation depended on technical superiority and surprise. The regime expected conventional assault or desperate defense. They didn't anticipate a surgical strike against their command infrastructure. Their security protocols were designed for external threats, not internal precision attacks by opponents who understood their systems intimately. Dex reached the computer core ahead of schedule. His enhanced perception processed the interface layout instantly. He bypassed 3 layers of security using combination codes derived from hegemony standard operating procedures. The system recognized his access credentials as valid despite his rogue status. The regime hadn't revoked his clearance. They assumed he was dead. Inside the core, he planted tailored viruses designed to compromise fleet coordination. The programs didn't destroy systems. They introduced calculated errors into navigation, targeting, and communication functions. The errors would compound during combat operations, making coordinated action impossible. The fleet would remain physically intact but functionally crippled. Lyra monitored the results from Sanctuary's control center. She watched as the bombardment cannons powered down, their targeting data too corrupted to maintain firing solutions. The interceptor ships began drifting from formation as navigation systems provided conflicting course instructions. Communications between vessels degraded into nonsensical data streams. The team extracted with 27 seconds remaining on their timeline. They retreated along predetermined routes, avoiding the chaos they'd created. Security teams rushed toward the bridge while the strike team moved away from it. The regime's response was exactly as predicted, focused on protecting command personnel rather than securing critical systems. The fleet's bombardment cannons went silent across the formation. Their massive barrels cooled without firing a single shot. Targeting computers displayed error messages where enemy coordinates should have appeared. Navigation systems showed conflicting course plots that made formation flying hazardous. The overwhelming firepower became useless without coordination. Victory came through precision rather than power. The strike team hadn't destroyed a single ship. They'd rendered the entire fleet incapable of effective action. The regime's technological superiority became their vulnerability. Their dependence on networked systems created single points of failure that skilled operators could exploit. The surgical strike demonstrated a new form of warfare. It emphasized intelligence over infantry, knowledge over munitions. 4 soldiers had neutralized a fleet not by outfighting it, but by outthinking it. They fought like surgeons removing tumors, precise incisions that eliminated threat without unnecessary damage. The patient would live, but the disease was gone. The fleet's bombardment cannons powered down with a deep mechanical sigh. Their massive barrels, which moments before had been charged with enough energy to level mountains, went quiet. Safety protocols detected critical errors in targeting data. The computers couldn't verify what they were aiming at. The weapons refused to fire without confirmed targets. Dex's team moved through the flagship's bridge with clinical efficiency. They didn't kill unless necessary. Their strikes disabled systems and personnel without permanent damage. A precise blow to a console here, a neural pressure point strike there. They created pockets of confusion that spread through the command structure. The bridge crew struggled to understand what was happening. Lyra's interference from Sanctuary compounded the chaos. She fed corrupted data into the targeting systems. The computers showed enemy signatures where none existed. They reported friendly ships as hostile contacts. The bombardment cannons received conflicting firing solutions that changed every second. The safety systems ultimately overrode all attack commands. Communications across the fleet degraded into nonsense. Ships received navigation coordinates that placed them on collision courses. Status reports showed impossible readings. Command channels filled with overlapping emergency alerts. Captains couldn't verify what was happening beyond their own viewports. The fleet's coordination, its greatest strength, became its critical weakness. 3 interceptor ships collided without warning. Their navigation systems provided conflicting course corrections during evasive maneuvers. The first collision damaged engine housings. The second caused a coolant leak. The third was minor but added to the growing confusion. The accidents weren't fatal, but they were debilitating. The bombardment cannons remained silent despite frantic commands from flag officers. Their targeting computers couldn't achieve weapon lock. Safety protocols prevented firing without positive identification. The massive weapons that could have destroyed Sanctuary sat useless. Their power meant nothing without direction. The fleet's overwhelming force became irrelevant. Ships drifted out of formation as navigation systems failed. Weapons remained idle despite the perceived threat. Command structure fractured as communications broke down. The regime's technological superiority, once intimidating, now worked against them. Their dependence on networked systems created vulnerabilities. Sanctuary watched from the asteroid base. Sensors showed the fleet's power signatures diminishing. Weapon systems went offline. Engines idled. The massive armada that had come to destroy them now floated helplessly. The base's residents observed the silent fleet with held breath. The immediate threat had been neutralized. Victory came through precise intervention rather than brute force. The strike team hadn't destroyed a single ship. They'd targeted the fleet's nervous system, its command and control infrastructure. The approach emphasized intelligence over firepower, knowledge over munitions. They fought like surgeons rather than soldiers. The 4-minute operation demonstrated a new combat paradigm. Small, skilled teams could defeat larger forces through strategic targeting. The regime's technological edge became their weak point when opponents understood their systems. The battle wasn't won through destruction, but through making destruction impossible. The fleet began retreating hours later. Ships slowly reformed ranks as systems were rebooted and reset. They moved away from Sanctuary without firing a shot. The withdrawal was orderly but unmistakable. They'd been defeated without a single direct engagement. The message would resonate across the sector. Sanctuary's survival proved that principle could overcome power. The regime's ideology of strength through purity had been challenged by adaptability and ingenuity. Their show of force had been rendered impotent by careful planning and precise execution. The victory would inspire others who questioned the regime's invincibility. Footage from Sanctuary's defense spread faster than anyone expected. Clips of enhanced soldiers shielding civilians, not attacking them. Prototypes using their training to protect mixed-species families. The images moved through communication networks like quiet corrections to a long-running falsehood. Parents who had hidden their children's mixed heritage began speaking openly. They showed images of their families, their children's faces, their ordinary lives. The regime's narrative of contamination faced growing contradiction from daily reality. Scientists who had worked in secret started sharing their findings. Medical data showing improved healing rates from hybrid research, agricultural techniques that worked across species lines, engineering solutions derived from combined perspectives. The information bypassed official channels, moving through personal networks and secure relays. Each shared discovery demonstrated that diversity produced practical benefits the regime's purity laws prevented. The regime's control systems began showing strain. Surveillance networks designed to monitor compliance instead recorded growing defiance. Census data revealed higher numbers of mixed-species relationships than previously documented. Bloodline tracking systems flagged so many exceptions that the alerts became meaningless. The apparatus of control was cracking under the weight of refused compliance. Kai's existence became known beyond sanctuary. Images of a healthy hybrid child circulated quietly. His development milestones were documented and shared. Parents facing similar situations saw proof that their children weren't aberrations. They saw a boy who was curious, energetic, normal. The regime's classification of such children as contaminants seemed increasingly absurd when faced with actual living proof. Recruitment inquiries to sanctuary increased steadily. People sought protection but also community. They wanted to live where their relationships weren't crimes and their children weren't considered mistakes. The base's population grew gradually but consistently. Each new arrival brought skills, knowledge, and further evidence against the regime's ideology. The revolution shifted from military conflict to cultural change. It happened in homes where parents chose to reveal hidden truths, in laboratories where scientists shared forbidden data, in classrooms where teachers discussed biological diversity as strength. The battle was no longer about defeating an enemy, but about building alternatives that made the enemy irrelevant. Change didn't come from a single victory or dramatic event. It came from thousands of individual decisions. A family choosing to stop hiding, a scientist choosing to share research, a soldier choosing to protect rather than attack. Each choice weakened the regime's control in small but cumulative ways. The regime's propaganda efforts grew increasingly desperate. They couldn't counter the evidence of working alternatives. Their claims of genetic superiority rang hollow when confronted with medical data showing hybrid advantages. Their warnings about contamination seemed paranoid when people saw healthy mixed-species communities thriving. Sanctuary became a model that others emulated. Small communities formed in other unclaimed territories. They shared resources and information through secure networks. They developed their own approaches to cross-species cooperation. The movement became decentralized, adaptable, resilient. It was no longer one place but many. The galaxy's awakening was quiet but persistent. People realized the regime's control depended on their participation. Withdrawal of that participation was more effective than direct confrontation. The war of ideas was won not by proving the regime wrong, but by demonstrating that better options existed. The proof was in the living, in the working, in the growing. Kai asked the question on his 18th birthday. He stood on the observation deck watching ships depart for New Geneva. His voice was quiet but clear. He wanted to know what they expected him to become. Scientist, soldier, something entirely his own. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with years of symbolism. Dex answered first. His voice carried the same even tone he used for tactical assessments. He said the choice was Kai's to make. The answer was simple, deliberate. It carried the weight of their entire struggle distilled into one principle. Lyra added that becoming himself was the only expectation that mattered. Their responses weren't guidance. They were permission. The moment represented their movement's core premise. The revolution hadn't been about replacing one set of rules with another. It was about creating space for individual choice. Kai's question acknowledged the freedom they'd fought to establish. His uncertainty was the point. Destiny had been replaced by possibility. Their bedtime story had become the movement's founding fable. It was a simple narrative about a soldier who rediscovered his humanity through love. The story spread through sanctuary and beyond. People repeated it like a shared secret. It contained their entire philosophy in parable form. Choice mattered more than destiny. Love was stronger than programming. Kai's departure for advanced study validated their long-term vision. He wasn't fleeing or hiding. He was pursuing education openly under his own name. The Academy on New Geneva had accepted his application without questioning his hybrid status. The galaxy had changed enough that such things were possible now. His journey was ordinary, which made it extraordinary. The family's personal journey mirrored the broader transformation. They'd moved from hiding to living, from secrecy to openness. Kai growing up safe and free proved their efforts hadn't been wasted. His normal childhood was their greatest achievement. The quiet moments mattered more than the dramatic confrontations. Their real victory wasn't military or political. It was watching their son consider his future without fear. He could choose any path without considering genetic restrictions or ideological limitations. His options were limited only by his interests and abilities. That freedom represented everything they'd fought for. The resistance had created a world where their child could choose his own path. That was the ultimate measure of their success. Not territory gained or enemies defeated. The ability of the next generation to define themselves on their own terms. The revolution was complete when it became unnecessary. Kai packed his belongings methodically. His movements were a blend of his parents' traits, Lyra's careful precision, Dex's economical efficiency. He didn't seem anxious about his departure. He approached it like another life experience, not a monumental occasion. His calmness showed how much the world had changed. Dex and Lyra watched him from the doorway. They didn't offer advice or last-minute instructions. Their presence was supportive but not intrusive. They understood that stepping back was part of letting go. The protection he needed now was space to make his own mistakes. The ship to New Geneva awaited its passengers. Kai joined the line of students boarding. He didn't look back until he reached the ramp. His smile was brief but genuine. Then he turned and moved forward into his own life. The image lingered long after the ship had departed. Their work wasn't finished, but this chapter was. They'd built a foundation strong enough for their child to stand on independently. The future would be whatever he and his generation made of it. The revolution had succeeded because it made itself obsolete. Dex told the story with the same economy he used for everything. It was simple. A soldier designed for obedience found a scientist marked for elimination. He saw past the official classification to the person beneath. His training said protect the regime. Something deeper said protect her instead. He chose the harder path. The story didn't use dramatic language. It stated facts. The soldier acted. The scientist persisted. Their connection grew. The fable spread through Sanctuary's corridors. People repeated it during meal shifts and maintenance work. It became their shared origin story. Parents told it to children. Soldiers recounted it during watch rotations. The narrative was simple enough to remember, profound enough to sustain them. It wasn't about grandeur. It was about choices made in quiet moments. Sanctuary remained the operational center of a growing network. They didn't hide anymore. Their location was known to allies across the sector. Ships came and went regularly, exchanging information and resources. The base functioned as a working model of their principles. Different species collaborated on projects. Enhanced soldiers protected civilian researchers. The community demonstrated daily that diversity created resilience. Dex and Lyra continued their work with steady focus. He improved security systems and trained new protectors. She advanced her medical research, sharing findings freely. Their personal story became a template others referenced. They showed that bonds formed by choice could be stronger than those dictated by biology. Their relationship was both ordinary and revolutionary. Medical breakthroughs continued emerging from cross-species labs. New treatments for radiation sickness, advanced tissue regeneration techniques, neural repair methods that combined different biological approaches. Each discovery provided practical benefits that convinced skeptics. The regime's restrictions seemed increasingly irrational when alternatives produced better results. The galaxy's shift was gradual but measurable. Colonies began repealing purity laws quietly. Scientific exchanges increased across species lines. Military units reported more defections from enhanced soldiers. The change wasn't dramatic. It was cumulative. Each small adjustment made the next one easier. The regime's power diminished through demonstrated alternatives. Their claims of genetic superiority faced constant contradiction from working models. Their control systems became less effective as people saw better options. Their military found fewer willing recruits. Their scientists faced growing criticism. The infrastructure of fear slowly crumbled. The strongest bonds in Sanctuary were forged through conscious choice. Relationships that crossed species lines, friendships between former enemies, alliances based on shared values rather than shared biology. These connections proved more durable than those based on genetic compatibility. They were built on something deeper than instinct. Dex and Lyra watched Kai's ship disappear into the starfield. They stood together in the observation deck, their shoulders touching. The silence between them was comfortable. They had built a foundation strong enough for their son to launch from. His future was his to determine. Their work had created that possibility. They turned from the viewport together. The base hummed around them, filled with lives they'd helped protect. The work continued. Not with dramatic battles, but with daily choices, medical research, security patrols, community meetings. The revolution had become maintenance. They were building a galaxy where love determined who we become, not genetics. The project was ongoing, but the foundation was solid. The revolution wasn't won in some grand final battle. It was built in small moments. 1,000 choices to reach across species lines, to trust when fear said not to love when laws forbade it. Their story proved something simple but profound. The strongest bonds aren't forged by shared genetics or forced loyalty. They're built by conscious courage, by choosing connection over isolation. The galaxy is still choosing every single day. One act of trust at a time, one refusal to hate, one decision to see strength in difference, not threat.